Hello again. Well, I've been in Launceston, God, what day is it? It's Friday. I've been in Launceston over a week now, and I'm still not unpacked. Well, I've unpacked the lounge room, and I've half unpacked the kitchen, which is kind of the stalling point for when you're unpacking, because the kitchen's more or less unpacked so I can get myself fed. The lounge room's unpacked so I can sort of sit down and watch some TV, and I've got the broadband on so the internet's keeping me amused, and which means there's no real imperative to continue to unpack. So I've been kind of lazy about it. So I did my usual thing this morning. I got up, had my shower, went for a walk, and had some breakfast and all that sort of stuff. I came back and I went, right, I'm going to do some unpacking. That lasted all of about 10 minutes, because one of the first boxes I came across was a box I didn't actually pack up when I moved out of the old place.
That's weird. Where did you get an extra box from that you didn't pack up?
It is in fact a box that had remained unopened from the last time I moved. I ripped off the tape and rediscovered what I'd almost forgotten I had. My collection of retro gaming consoles. Now, some of these were mine, some of these I inherited from a friend when he moved up to Melbourne. So I emptied out the box of all this gear, and instead of continuing to unpack, I hooked it up to the TV and spent most of the afternoon gaming. Now, this stuff is back in the day where games had to be fun to play, because it wasn't all graphics pretty. Now, these games are the fun games. A lot of you out there watching me now are probably too young to remember most of these. But this is from the golden age of gaming, where games had to be fun to play to survive. You couldn't count on them being remarkably pretty and, next-gen graphics with, really smooth textures and, and 3D rendering and all that sort of crap that just sort of gets in the way of having a really good gaming experience these days. Games had to be fun to play because they didn't look very pretty. Anyway, let's see the list. Nintendo Entertainment Console. Sadly, this beastie doesn't work anymore, but I have plans for the shell. The Sega Master System. The original Sega Master System. I actually have 3 Master Systems. I've got this, the original one, and I have 2 Master System 2s. Now, as any retro gamer know, the Master System 2 came with a built-in game, Alex Kidd. That's a fun game. I just burned up 15 minutes before I actually came to make this video playing that, so... Interesting fact, the Master System didn't do very well in the American market. I'm not sure how well it did in Japan, but seeing as Japan is the home of Nintendo, I'm assuming that it probably did just as crappily as it did in America. But here in Australia, the Master System actually did pretty well. It was as popular, if not more popular, than the Nintendo Entertainment System. I was always a Nintendo boy. Before that, I was an Atari boy. My very first console was an Atari 2600, and I loved that thing. I loved it with a passion. I got it for Christmas one year, like the first year that came out in Australia, and I would play it and play it and play it for hours. I had a whole stack of games. Probably the games I spent most time playing on the Atari 2600. Cubert, Pac-Man, Missile Command, loved Missile Command, Breakout, loved Breakout, Outlaw. Anyway, there's a sad end to my tale of the Atari 2600. My mother sold it in a garage sale without my knowledge. She had wrongly assumed that I never play the thing anymore. She bloody sold it on me. Raging! So I don't have one of those anymore. My mate Ian does have one, in fact he has 2. We've got the Atari 2600, the original Darth Vader looking one, and the Atari 2600 Junior. Piece of crap that it was. Anyway, moving on. The Mega Drive. Specifically, this one's the Sega Mega Drive 2, which is a little bit smaller than the original Mega Drive. For those of you out there in America going, why the hell is he calling that the Mega Drive? That's obviously the Sega Genesis. Well, it was only called the Genesis in North America. Down here in Australia, it was the Sega Mega Drive, which I think is a cooler name than Genesis.
Mega Drive!
Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, or SNES as it became known. Never had one. Wanted one, never got one. Fortunately for me, my best friend when I was growing up had one, and I was around his house just about every day playing on the thing. F-Zero, Mario, and Street Fighter. Oh, the hours we burn away playing Street Fighter 2. Ridiculous. Somewhere around here I've got a box full of my Game Boys. I've owned just about every Game Boy iteration there ever was. The original Game Boy. Except I didn't have the original grey one. I got them when they started bringing out the colour, so I got a really cool looking black one. It looks enormous by today's standards, but back in the day it was tiny. And the Game Boy Pocket don't have that anymore. Sold that. Got the Game Boy Color. In fact, I had 2 Game Boy Colors, one of which is a special limited edition Pokemon Game Boy Color. I've got the Game Boy Advance, I've got the Game Boy SP, I even had the Game Boy Player for my GameCube. But although the Game Boy became my favourite handheld system, it was not my first handheld system. My first handheld system was the most powerful handheld system of its day. Unfortunately, it didn't really do very well because it didn't have many really great software licenses, so it had a lot of second-rate games and a few really great first-party games. And it was the Atari Lynx. As you can see, still got it in its original box because this thing was my pride and joy. I loved it. It used 6 AA batteries and lasted about 2.5–3 hours on those 6 batteries. So it had pathetic battery life, but it was an awesomely powerful handheld machine for its time. I loved this thing. Look at that, it's a work of art. Maybe not really. It's an ugly bastard of a machine, but it was very powerful for its day. And I'm not sure you could really call it portable as much as it is handheld because nobody had pockets that big. It was still cool. And then of course we have one handheld system from back in the day left. The Sega Game Gear, which was basically just a Sega Master System made portable. So they just made it smaller and jammed a screen on there. Also ate up the batteries like nobody's business. Gear Master. This thing would jump in the cartridge slot in the back there and allow you to chuck Master System games directly in there. There was also a TV tuner going around for this thing, which I really wanted but never got. And then, of course, the Nintendo 64. I was never really a big fan of the Nintendo 64. In fact, I didn't get one when they first came out. The only reason I got one was after I got addicted to Pokemon and they started bringing out Pokemon games for this thing. We all know the fate of the Nintendo 64. It got slaughtered by the Sony PlayStation. Now, these days, I hate Sony with a passion. I might do an entire new blog on that because I've got a lot to say about Sony. But back in the day when it was a choice between the Sony PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, the Sony PlayStation was obviously the way to go. Games like Crash Bandicoot, so many hours burned away on Crash Bandicoot. The Tekken games, loved the Tekken games, loved them. But sadly, as is well known about the quality of Sony's gear, this thing barely works anymore. The Nintendo 64 still works as if it was brand new. This thing I have to turn upside down just to get it to read a disc because the laser tracking ramps that they had the laser sliding on wore away and gradually the laser fell out of alignment. Sony, you make pieces of crap. I don't know how you keep getting away with it. Even the Sega Master Systems I've got still work perfectly. And in case you're wondering, one of the best games they ever brought out for the Nintendo 64, Super Smash Brothers. But yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last few hours, just playing with my retro games. I love it.
And I can't wait for the Nintendo Wii.
Gonna be awesome! I'm gonna go play some Sonic. Catch you next time.